The Korean War, it's often known as the Forgotten War. It was between two other wars. It was between the Second World War and the Vietnam War. Of course, there's loads and loads of films about that. But it's a really important war because it's the first conflict of the Cold War. It was the first time that a UN force was assembled, and it was also the first time jet fighters were used in war. Bit of background: Korea is over here, and from 1910, it was part of the Empire of Japan. And we all know what happened in the Second World War. Japan lost its empire, and so Korea was split between the Soviet North, with Pyongyang as the capital, and the South was controlled by America, with Seoul as the capital, sort of split across the 38th parallel, which is kind of arbitrary. And two Koreas emerged from this division. A guy called Kim Il-sung was installed by Joseph Stalin in the North, and the US appointed a guy called Syngman Rhee. North Korea, known as the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. A little bit about Kim Il-sung. He was a communist guerrilla, and he spent most of the Second World War in the Soviet Union. And he saw Joseph Stalin's cult of personality, and he was very, very much impressed by it. So after the Second World War, you had the resumption of the Chinese Civil War. This is a war between the nationalists and the communists. And the KPA, the Korean People's Army, the North Korean army, assisted the communists, and eventually the communists won and Mao Zedong took power. Now, there's no controversy about this. The North did start the war. Kim Il-sung convinced Stalin that an invasion would be a good idea, and the KPA crosses the 38th parallel on June the 25th. And they made very, very early gains because they're assisted by a huge amount of Soviet military artillery and tanks, and the South Korean army is very, very weak. So the North pushes down into the south around the city of Busan. The UN takes action. Interestingly, the Soviet Union had a veto, but they were boycotting the UN at the time, so they couldn't do anything about it. And the UN assembles a multinational force led by the US. And you might ask, well, the US is involved, and they've just used nukes against Japan, so why didn't they use them against North Korea? Well, there's lots and lots of moral questions about that, obviously, but the Soviet Union got hold of nuclear weapons in 1949, so that was out of the question. So what the US does is they have a very powerful air force, and they bomb the KPA positions whilst holding out at Busan. Meanwhile, Douglas MacArthur goes all the way up to the other side of the country and lands amphibiously at Incheon. So the US are stationed at both corners of the country, and they force the KPA right backwards. And then the US goes into North Korea. Hang on, they're not meant to do that. They're only there to prevent the North's aggression. And they go up and they take Pyongyang and most of the country. And China wasn't too keen on this. So China, being an ally of North Korea, 500,000 Chinese troops come into Korea over the Yalu River, and they push the US-led forces all the way back, and they take Seoul. There's then a 2-year stalemate, a lot of trench warfare, until the border eventually stabilises roughly around the 38th parallel. So after these 2 years, there's an eventual ceasefire, not a peace accord, a ceasefire, and this is the treaty being signed by representatives from North Korea, the USA, and China. So that's the end of the war. So you might ask, well, what happens next? Well, in the North, you have a consolidation of power by Kim Il-sung, and he puts in a ridiculous cult of personality, and he survives there as their leader and becomes eternal president. He's still president of North Korea, even though he's been dead for a while. Whereas in the South, it's easy to think that things were very rosy in the South, but they went through a very checkered history until democracy took hold in 1987. And all of these companies are South Korean. You've probably got mobile phones, cars, all made by these companies. And the difference between the two Koreas can be summed up with this slide. This is North Korea and South Korea at night. North Korea's got pretty much no electricity apart from Pyongyang. And technically the war's not over. So what could happen next? We could, North Korea's not got nuclear weapons. It could all end up very messy indeed. Have a good day. So